people accuse us as Catholics as, well, your religion is one of rules and regulations. That's what you're all about, rules and regulations. But it's not, is it? It really is a continuation of God fully revealing himself in his Son, Jesus Christ, and then giving us a home to live in, and certainly the Word. But we're not really a religion of rules and regulations. It's more relationship, right?
It's all relational. God is in himself relationship.
Yeah.
And so as he draws us into that very relationship, which is love, a love that is so strong that three persons are truly one God. It's amazing that we could have such a love and be part of such a love. And if we see a great person, and I imagine a lot of our viewers, when they look at you, Jeff, and they say, like, how could I be more like Jeff Cavins? And if you wrote a book that said, these are the principles by which I live, and this is what orders my heart, and these are my priorities, probably a lot of people would love to buy that and model themselves. This is really what God has done. He said, here are the rules by which I live. Here's the ordering of my heart. Here are the principles so that you can become more like me. And then you're really going to experience that by being in relationship with me. So he's giving them a pattern, a logic by which they can understand the way that he is accompanying them in the desert, protecting them, providing for them, even punishing them, the remedies that he provides when they don't trust, when they struggle, and he provides a path, and he's giving the logic by which they could understand, put words to all of that and a pattern to it.
You know, I remember reading years ago Maimonides, and great Jewish scholar from of old, and talking about how coming out of Egypt into the wilderness was a time also of dealing with addictions. And that he even mentions that at one time Israel even struggled with the worship of sheep. And of course, they came out of a place where they worshiped everything. You know, they worshiped the Nile, they worshiped the sun, they worshiped the bull god, they worshiped, it goes on and on. And when you come out of a country that worships everything, and you get involved in it yourself, and then suddenly you are not in that country, but you're in the wilderness where there doesn't seem to be anything to worship anymore, and you might have to create it yourself, like a bull god, you know, made out of gold. How does the desert deal with the addictions in our lives? I know a lot of people watching the show that they struggle, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be. Let's talk a little bit about addiction, the wilderness.
When we pull away, as you said, suddenly there's nothing to worship. When we pull those things away, and it's really the first kind of big phase of the spiritual life, what later would be called the purgative way, that part of that purgation is removing some of those things that tempt us or that we cling to. When I think of all of these different gods, I really appreciate the concept of a value hierarchy. Sometimes we get a little bit too black and white, but really there are gradations of things. Sheep are good. They're not the most important. They're not the highest good. So getting things in the right place in the value hierarchy is kind of what we're always doing internally to a certain degree. But when we pull some of those things back, if we can live without something, we've shown that it's not the top of the value hierarchy. This is not the one thing necessary. And as we pull a few things back, it's the kind of thing that we tend to do during Lent, our desert of Lent. And the Israelites, of course, lost a number of things. As much as they lost the oppression, the slavery, the overworking, the disenfranchisement of Egypt, they also lost a number of other creature comforts, the leeks and the garlic.
I was just going to say that, the leeks and the garlic.
And so living without those things, then they have to adjust. And that can be very hard. I mean, quitting alcohol cold turkey or some other addictive substance can really put our bodies through shock in a way. One of the great supports for that is community. And the fact that they're doing this together is a great help for them. And they're doing it together under the guidance of one like Moses, who's really a holy man. And they're doing that through Moses and guided by God and his word. And then they have this proper worship that's being introduced. And so there are a number of things that go together that support them, but some of the things that they learn to depend on in Egypt, those addictions, get removed, and then they feel the pinch of that.
That is a good thought that they're doing this as a community, as a family. And what would it have been like if it was just you? Just you got brought out into the wilderness. That'd be a whole different situation. But like anything else, the gifts that God gives us, Moses, for example, and his leadership, and Aaron, and we can begin to find fault. We can begin to find problems with our leaders. And certainly the children of Israel are finding fault with the gifts that God is bringing in their life.
Yeah, we're so good at that, aren't we?
We are.
And that goes back to that trust question. I mean, we come by our distrust honestly. We have a lot of reasons to not trust things that are very flawed, because guess what? All of our leaders are sinners. And Moses and Aaron were human and limited in their weakness, and then maybe even in sinfulness in intentional ways, But our leaders are limited, and the gifts are limited. One of the things that Gregory of Nyssa gets into in the life of Moses is this idea of God always drawing us to more. One of the things he wrestled with philosophically was how finite and infinite could actually come together. But God constantly reveals the infinite through the finite. And so on the one hand, we experience the limits of the finite. And Moses didn't have all the answers. He had his own shortcomings. The manna didn't taste great all the time, and the desert was hot and silent and difficult. And we feel the limits of that. But God is always pouring the infinite through that. And as we discover Him in those gifts, then it opens us to long for more. Our hearts are made for the infinite, and so when we get Him through the leadership, through the Word, through the movements in the desert, then it does open us to a greater desire for what we actually want. Another way to describe addiction is trying to fill an infinite hole with a finite substance. We never get there, of course, so we have to allow the finite things to become openings to the infinite, to God Himself.
Thank you for watching. If you would like to see more amazing content on the Bible, be sure to like and subscribe.